Senator Blumenthal, I find it so interesting that you didn't bring any of this up during President Biden's administration when he was doing everything to protect Hunter Biden, his son. And I think you just saw what Director Radcliffe just released.
You know, this is an effort to be positive.
If I can finish answering the question, I'm not going to yell over you. I'm not going to get in the gutter with you. But information that the Biden administration told them not to investigate Hunter Biden's involvement with Ukraine. I'm not going to be lectured to you about integrity by someone who lied about being in the military just to be elected a senator.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just so the American people understand, this issue of weaponization of justice goes to the core of the integrity of our criminal justice system. And I think we can all agree that no individual, no group should be targeted simply because they are a political opponent or because the President of the United States has some personal animosity toward them. You've just said that President Trump is the most transparent president in history. Tragically and chillingly, you may be right when it comes to criminal justice, because far from ending weaponization of justice, I would submit, Madam Attorney General, that President Trump has embodied it. And we have a record. It is a public record of his express instructions that certain individuals be investigated. The Attorney General of New York, Tish James, my colleague Adam Schiff, the former CISA director, Chris Krebs, the DHS former Chief of Staff, Miles Taylor. There's a list. And he has been transparent. In fact, 5 days before the indictment of James Comey, he put this post up as instructions to you. He didn't mince words. He was very open and public that you should indict James Comey and others because they are guilty as hell. No more delay now. 5 days before you indicted, or grand jury at your instructions indicted James Comey. I'd like to know from you what conversations you've had with President Trump about the indictment of James Comey.
Senator, I am not going to discuss any conversations I have or have not had with the President of the United
Did you
States.
see that
You're
post?
an attorney, you have a law degree, and you know that I'm not going to do that. I also find it fascinating, because I'll keep fighting to ensure that law enforcement and the judicial process move forward without political interference. No one is above the law, not even the president. That's a quote from you, Senator Blumenthal, in 2017.
Well, let me ask you then, when you saw that
No
post,
one is above the law. That was your quote.
When you saw that post, did you talk to anybody in the White House?
I am not going to discuss any conversations I have, nor any investigations, nor
So you were unwilling
any
to tell
pending
this committee
cases.
about conversations with the White House
And if I may
regarding James
continue,
Comey's indictment.
and if I may
Let me show
continue,
you a picture.
James Comey was indicted by one of the most liberal grand juries in the United States.
The night before James Comey's indictment, you had dinner with the President of the United States. Pretty intimate group.
Actually, there were a lot of people there that night. That's a great
James
picture.
Comey discussed at that dinner?
I love that picture. That's a great picture. And there were a lot of people there that night. I think the entire cabinet was there.
Did you discuss James Comey with the President of the United States? He was sitting just to your left.
Well, 2 seats down, yes, 2 seats down. And I am not going to discuss any
I'm going to take
conversations
that
I have
as a
had or not
yes,
have with the
because
President
the
of the
American
United
public
States.
is entitled to know, Madam Attorney General,
The entire cabinet was at that dinner,
whether
too,
you took instructions from President Trump after he told you very directly to indict James Comey, which is weaponization of the Department of Justice.
Oh,
You
whoa,
know,
whoa, whoa.
I want to agree with my colleague, Senator Hawley, that weaponization of our justice system must end. That's the reason that I propose legislation, and I challenge him and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join me in legislation that would create a statutory right of action for people who are selectively or maliciously prosecuted for political reasons. It would codify your manual, the Department of Justice manual, on political prohibitions against political considerations in charging decisions, and prohibit the White House from intervening, President Trump and any other president from intervening in charging decisions. It would make reforms to the grand jury process. You've just said this grand jury was liberal. We should reform the grand jury process to ensure that the government is not abusing its power and authority, and it will require transparency and accountability reforms at DOJ so that you will and other attorneys general be held accountable for these kinds of decisions. Will you join me in supporting that kind of reform?
Senator Blumenthal, I find it so interesting that you didn't bring any of this up during President Biden's administration when he was doing everything to protect Hunter Biden, his son. And I think you just saw what Director Radcliffe just released.
You know, this is an effort to be positive.
If I can finish answering the question, I'm not going to yell over you. I'm not going to get in the gutter with you. But information that the Biden administration told them not to investigate Hunter Biden's involvement with Ukraine. I'm not going to be lectured to you about integrity by someone who lied about being in the military just to be elected a senator.
The merger between Hewlett-Packard Enterprises and Juniper Network was settled. You authorized the settlement. It was the subject of a lawsuit to block it. The settlement produced virtually no concessions from Hewlett-Packard. It was a settlement that prompted criticism from the Antitrust Division. Did you authorize that settlement yourself?
As I stated earlier, Gail Slater is doing an incredible job running the antitrust unit. And as I stated earlier, that is still a pending matter. As you should know with a law degree,
did you not,
that all mergers. If I can finish answering the question.
I'm going to,
if I could finish. No, I'm answering the question.
Because my time is limited.
No, well then don't ask me a question. So,
let me just ask you,
as I said, you have a law degree. You know that not only are mergers agreed upon, but they have to go to a court of law to be approved. It's a multi-step process. And as I said earlier, that is still pending. And I have full faith in Gail Slater.
And Ms. Slater reportedly objected to the settlement.
Reportedly.
And moreover, two of her top officials were fired, Roger Alford and Bill Sinner. Did you authorize and direct those firings after they objected to the settlement?
I am not going to discuss personnel matters or pending litigation in my office.
Let me ask you about another merger. The merger involving two home health care agencies on favorable terms, likely to drive up costs for millions of America. The Transportation Department's rule to provide compensation to travelers impacted by airline-caused flight delays, which was canceled. The merger of Skydance and Paramount, after Paramount's ownership took a number of steps favorable to the president. These kinds of mergers belie the claims that President Trump himself has made, that this administration will stop big corporate mergers that ultimately benefit the owners of those corporations rather than consumers or ordinary, everyday Americans.
Senator,
And let me ask you
boy,
about
you just listed,
particularly.
you just gave a
Well,
list
let me just finish.
of many mergers.
I have a question
Can you
for
talk
you.
to me about the issue with these mergers?
I do have a question. In the merger that took place,
Which
that was
merger? You've
approved
listed many.
involving American Express GBT, I understand that Brian Ballard, longtime backer and head of the law firm where you worked, was instrumental in lobbying the Justice Department to drop that lawsuit. It was dismissed, so it's not subject to a court review. What conversations did you have with Mr. Ballard?
Senator Blumenthal, I cannot believe that you would accuse me of impropriety when you lied about your military service.
I am
you
not
lied.
asking
You
you.
admitted you
I am
lied
not
to be
accusing you
elected
of
a U.S. senator.
impropriety.
You
I'm asking
lied.
you
How
about
dare you? I'm a
conversations
career prosecutor.
with Mr.
Don't you
Ballard,
ever challenge my integrity.
had
I have
apparently-
abided by every ethics standard. Do not question my ability to be fair and impartial as Attorney General, and anything
You'll
with
answer that
my
question to
former
another of my
firm,
colleagues.
Ballard Partners.
Thank you.
Senator Lee has asked for the chair.
Yeah, just wanted to note for the record the Paramount merger that he referenced.
All right, I just finished watching that Senate Judiciary hearing clip, and I got to tell you, what we just saw says a whole lot more about Washington politics than it does about Attorney General Pam Bondi. But before we get into it, welcome back to Voice of Truth. If you believe in straight talk, real patriot values, and holding Washington accountable no matter who's in charge, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment below. I want to hear your take after you watch this hearing. Now, I'm sitting here watching this clip, and right from the start, you can see the tone. Instead of a serious oversight hearing, it feels like a political ambush. Senator after senator isn't really asking questions to get answers. They're trying to create sound bites, hoping for a viral moment they can use on social media. Take the whole National Guard discussion. The question was whether the Attorney General had conversations with the White House before National Guard troops were sent into cities. She refused to talk about internal conversations, which, by the way, is completely normal. Attorneys general from both parties have always protected confidential discussions with the White House. That's not some new scandal. That's standard practice. But instead of moving on to policy or solutions, the exchange turned into a shouting match. And here's the part people at home should be thinking about. If a city has a murder rate through the roof and local leadership isn't getting it under control, is it really outrageous for the federal government to step in and help? Most Americans don't think so. Most Americans just want safe streets. Then came the questions about the Qatar jet and the emoluments clause. You could see the strategy. Keep repeating the same talking point, even after she explained that her only involvement with Qatar was anti-human trafficking work. When it came to legal advice to the president, she pointed to the Office of Legal Counsel and Attorney-Client Confidentiality. Again, that's standard. Every administration relies on confidential legal advice. That's how the executive branch functions. Next, the Epstein questions. This part really stood out because you could tell it was meant to generate headlines. They pressed her about the so-called client list and tried to paint it as if she was hiding something. But she made it clear. She said it was on her desk for review, and after the review, the memo concluded there was no client list. That's the official position. You may like it, you may not, but that's what the investigation found. And then the exchange about the $50,000 payment. The senator kept asking the same question over and over, trying to corner her into a yes or no answer. Meanwhile, she kept pointing back to the Department of Justice review that found no wrongdoing. At some point, oversight crosses the line into political theater. If the investigation is complete and no wrongdoing was found, repeating the question 10 different ways doesn't magically create a scandal. But the biggest political moment came when multiple senators tried to tie the indictment of James Comey directly to President Trump. They pointed to social media posts and tried to suggest it was political interference. Bondi's response was simple. Comey was indicted by a grand jury, not by a tweet. not by a campaign speech, by a grand jury. That's how the legal system works. And here's what I noticed throughout the entire hearing. Every time she was asked a tough question, instead of a calm back and forth about law or policy, it quickly turned into accusations, personal attacks, and old political grudges. That's not serious governance. That's Washington at its worst. There was, however, one constructive moment. When the conversation turned to threats against federal judges, she didn't deflect, she didn't argue. She offered to sit down, set up a meeting, and address the issue directly. That's what leadership looks like. Not grandstanding, not viral clips, but actual problem solving. Look, at the end of the day, Americans don't live in Senate hearing rooms. They live in neighborhoods. They care about whether their streets are safe, whether criminals are held accountable, and whether the justice system treats people fairly. What we saw in a hearing with a lot of politics and very little focus on those real-world concerns. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, you should want a justice system that focuses on public safety and equal treatment under the law, not endless committee drama. So I want to hear from you. After watching that hearing, do you think those senators were really looking for answers, or were they just trying to score political points? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more straight talk reactions like this, make sure you subscribe to Voice of Truth, like the video, and share it with someone who needs to see what's really going on. Stay strong, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.